tissue. Well, that's important stuff because you quadruple the size of your brain from birth to adulthood, which is about, you reach adulthood brain size at about age 6, 7, or 8. But the glia hasn't finished growing around the nerves, so your ability to insulate your neurons isn't quite right. Which is why, now we know this is why teenagers are like wackos. It's true. They don't have an adult brain. They don't. And you don't really get an adult brain until you're in your early 20s. But the point, another interesting thing here is that here's our problem. We changed our pelvis so we could walk upright, and then later we grew our brain. Now this is a terrible thing to do, because you got to get that big-headed fetus, you got to get it out of the birth canal. And that's horrible. I mean, I only saw it done one time. It hurt, oh, I can't tell you. It can't tell. Women, be strong. Be strong. Humans have a horrible time in birth. So they had to put those, evolution developed these fontanelles so you could squish the skull as it goes through the canal. And if you've ever looked at a newborn baby, they're cone heads. They really are cone heads. Because the poor little thing had to get its head. Not only do you have to flip and flop and turn around and do a front flip, I mean, it's incredible what you have to do to get out. Well, it's the most gymnastic thing you'll ever do in your whole life is getting out of the birth canal. So you get through the birth canal and you come out with a cone head. And that's okay because it'll go away in a couple days. Don't worry. But that's why we have the fontanelles. And we don't close the fontanelles for a long time. There's one in the front called the metopic suture, right here, in your frontal bone that closes, in chimpanzee closes like the first day. In humans, ours stays open until 3 or 4 years to allow the brain to grow enough. If you fuse it too soon, if you sinustose it too soon, then what happens is you get those crazy head shapes that he was showing. And that, you can also, that all is a consequence of our brain got too big to get through the birth canal. So you say, why don't we just make bigger, have females have bigger pelvises? Well, that'd be a good idea, except humans are the only mammal that you can tell a female from a male pelvis from across the room. I could pick it about 99% of the time from here. No problem. You can't do that with a horse or a cow or a bear or anything. Lions, tigers, oh my, can't do it. In a human you can't. But it also, that's why women have more trouble with their knees, with their feet, and with their hips. Is because they had to broaden the pelvis as much as they could to get the kid through, but that also has biomechanical consequences and things like arthritis later on. And dislocate his. Is there a woman here that's dislocated her patella? Almost always there is. Because athletes, what happens is you have a steeper angle to your femur, it comes down like this. Steeper angle so you dislocate your patella much more often than men do. It's all a function of that size of your pelvis. So that's why you have fontanelles. And we'll talk about this later when we start talking about brain development. But that's why you have those fontanelles, and if they do sinus things too early, then you get funny shaped heads. But not to worry, they just give the kid a helmet. They just put helmets on it so it grows properly and everything's fine. But you can get those acrocentric skulls. You know, in South America, they're real popular. For some reason, the South Americans, pre-contact with Columbus, pre-Columbian, if you go down there, the wealthy, the Mayans and the Incas, they would take babies and wrap their heads with cord so the skull couldn't expand this way, so it expanded that way, and they have something called a tower skull, an acrocentric skull, which is a long, really big, long skull. Really weird. One more story. Then I'll leave you alone. Okay. Now, I got called over to that store called Mark's. I don't know. I don't know if you've ever been there. Anyway, there's a store called Marks and Cleaver. And what happens is I get called to the coroner's office and they find a skeleton somewhere. So they call me and they said, "Would you come identify these things?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I go over there. It was a really weird place to go. It's like, get smart. You go through these doors and go, and lights and fluorescent lights and everything. That's weird. Anyway, go in there. So at Mark's, what happened is they bought this stuff, and I didn't know this, but if you don't pick something up in customs, what happens is, and they sell it after, I don't know, 6 months or something, they sell it, nickel on the dollar. So Mark's is a store that goes down there and buys this stuff. So they bought these ceramic sort of heads, kind of, and they look sort of South American, kind of primitive-looking ceramic faces. Well, when they brought it to Mark's and they were opening up the boxes, one of the things had broken, and inside of it was a real human skull. So they called me over and they said, this is great. They had x-rays of all these things, and they said, "Is that a human skull?" Now let me tell you this. If you can't recognize a human skull, go back to basics. There's no other mammal on the planet that looks even remotely like a human. Anyway, they said, "Is that a human skull?" I said, "Yeah, it's a human skull." And they're like, "Are you sure?" "God, yeah, I'm sure. Just as this." And what had happened is that the person that wrapped these things, a person that was going to sell them, and I didn't know this, who would want to buy one of these skulls anyway? But if you go on eBay, God, you can buy anything on eBay. Go on eBay, some of these things could be worth $5,000. $1,000 for a human skull, but it's been deformed, and it's pre-Columbian. What are you going to do, put it on your mantle? I can't, it's kind of weird.
Check the innovation with some straw.
Yeah, I mean, use it to burn candles or something. I don't know what you're going to do. But anyway, so there are 11 of these things. Some of them are babies and most of them are adults. And I was working at the museum, so I wanted to keep the skulls for the museum collection, and they wouldn't let us do it because they have to give it back to country of origin. Well, we found out the country of origin was Peru, and the reason we know that is they wrapped these skulls before they put the plaster on them. They wrapped them in telephone pages, so we could actually find the exact cemetery where they've been looted from. And we dated them, carbon-14 them and everything, and yeah, they fit it perfectly. So that was really kind of cool. But these skulls were like this tall, only this big around and like that tall, cone heads. Really kind of neat, if you like that sort of thing. But we didn't get to keep them. Too bad. Here's another time I get called over there, and some poor woman had been murdered. I don't know. Anyway, once again, they find the skeleton, and they just take a backhoe, and they get the backhoe, and they dig up the skeleton, and they bring it to the lab over at the coroner's office. They just drop it on the floor. And I get up there, and they said, first of all, I said, "Is that a human?" "Is it a human?" "Yes, it's a human." And they had taken x-rays, and there was an x-ray of the person they thought it might be. Well, she had an impacted canine. And in an x-ray, an impacted canine looks for all the world like a Christmas tree light. You can't miss it. So I looked at it, and I looked at the skull, and I said, "Yeah, that's her." They said, "Are you sure?" Like, "Yeah, I'm sure, folks." Anyway, so the coroner's office is not like on television. Do not believe it's like on television where they reconstruct the faces and what they look like, although I do have a friend that does that. But anyway, that's my corner office. I've got more corner stories, but that's for later. All right, see you guys next week. We're going to talk about Odontogenesis, which is the creation